Homelessness 2.0, day 67. I'm going to go ahead and put myself up here. I liked that angle. It's pretty good. That's like dead on. Let's pull you a little bit to the side here. Alright. I grab my stuff for a grilled cheese. I'm thinking about possibly going to the store, grabbing a couple other things. Mostly just kind of like quick and easy stuff. But at the same time, I don't know. I do like this whole like camera angle thing. I like it better than what I've been doing. When I look back and watch the video from yesterday, it felt like a better overall shot. Felt less imposing. Sort of more, I guess, expository. In that, I'm kind of showing you things instead of it just kind of being there and having to try to describe everything. So I wouldn't say that I'm good at describing things overall. It's one of the reasons why I'm like, despite some of the feedback I've gotten from some things or another, or some people from another, I don't really think I would be a good teacher. I go off on too many tangents. I can't maintain focus. And sure, you can practice stuff like that. I've done speeches and whatnot, but even so, it's like so. For instance, 3 years ago when I got my job at iHeart, because I got it December 2018. By the way, I've been unemployed longer. iHeart was my last job. I've been unemployed longer than I was employed there. It's been almost 2 years since, COVID basically started 2 years ago. And then, picked up steam and all that. And by the time I got fired, although there wasn't a huge amount of community transmission like there is now, the whole point was to stop the spread. Just try to get people to be responsible. Look how that turned out. Fortunately, like I said before, I was able to at least get a decent amount of money in the process. And now I don't want to work anymore. Yay. It'd be nice. It'd be nice if, I could just keep getting paid and not have to work. What have I done to deserve that? Being alive. That's what I've done to deserve that. That's what all of us have done to deserve that. Simply being alive. Being alive is expensive, time consuming. It is difficult. We should not have to fight just for basic survival. One might say, well, what about nature and blah, blah, blah. And like, okay, what about it? What about society? What about growing and working together and improving our society so much that we don't need to do that? We've pretty much done that, but we've somehow decided, nah, you still gotta fight to stay alive. You still gotta go to work. You gotta have a job to be alive. And what about those jobs that don't pay well. They don't deserve, like, what is a living wage? A living wage is when you can go to a job, one, and be able to take care of all of your needs. All of them. Your food, your water, your heat, your shelter. All of these things are what make people be alive. So, when somebody says, well, you know, someone who flips burgers or whatever shouldn't make a living wage, you're basically saying that person isn't allowed to be alive. Right? I mean, that sounds exactly like it is. Like, you don't deserve to be alive. Because that's why you don't deserve to have a living wage, right? Isn't that how that goes? Sounds like it anyway. Like I said before, you know, we have systems in place that don't even allow us to make choices for ourselves. Because apparently other people think they know what choices we need to make. Like, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody who, for all intents and purposes, has somebody else that's, you know, not like a family member or whatever, but just everyday other kind of shit just shoved over like a ton of butter. Crap. So I hate this specific pan so far. It's just short. It's not very high walled, and I haven't really gotten accustomed to it yet. And so just shoved over a good chunk of butter. I have to clean up at some point too, and I've lost a good chunk of butter in the process. Yay! One might say, well, see right there, you can barely do anything for yourself. You should obviously have somebody else do it. You know, somebody else should be making your decisions for you. You shouldn't be making grilled cheese sandwiches, because obviously you suck at it. Here's another thought. Why don't I just have somebody else make the grilled cheese sandwich for me? we live in this weird, and I know I've, you know, already gone on to my whole anti-work, crazy, whatever you want to call it, thinking methodology, etc. But hey, such is life. You can't decide what I talk about. And you know, that actually really starts to go into the ethics and philosophies of choice, free will. And it makes me wonder about those people who not only want the system the way that it is, but maybe to be a bit more controlling, I suppose, of people who don't have much. You know, the so-called haves and have-nots, and how the haves supposedly are better judgers. They're better at judging with regards to what people need and whatnot. Toast is a little bit much in here, but that's whatever. Like, you could say, if you felt like it, I guess, that there is a very specific way to do life. I wouldn't agree with it, but you could say it if you really felt like it. And there are specific people who are better geared at knowing this stuff, and that we should leave it all up to them. Because they're the smart people. They know precisely what needs to be done. Now, I'm talking about it in the sense of all life. This is sort of the nature of the way that our capitalistic society works. Now, I'm not, like I said before, I'm not entirely opposed to capitalism. Some might say that the way our system currently works is exactly how capitalism is supposed to work and blah, 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 and that is problematic, etc. I'm more of a middle ground person, and I say that you don't have to follow everything 100%. Because then you're giving authority to a system of thought, of economic behavior, instead of, again, allowing people to come to decisions on their own. I'm still trying to get a hang of this stove and this specific pan for cooking with regards to all sorts of stuff. But, going back to the whole free will thing, it's like, what's the point of free will if you're not allowed to have it? That is literally like one of the biggest questions that philosophers have been trying to sort of crack, if you will. Try to fully understand what is free will, how does free will work. This is why your Plato's and your Aristotle's and your So here's a fun acronym that you can use. SPA. If you ever want to know, and I can't remember the dude's first name. Fuck. Socrates. Socrates taught Plato. Plato taught Aristotle. That's the order. SPA. The more you know. Marinara. They were always trying to figure out, the big questions like, do humans have souls and stuff like that? But, various questions, including the nature of free will. Because if God exists, then God somehow affects free will. And the way that God affects free will affects a lot of things. You could say that, should we just let God do whatever? A lot of people, even today, think yes, that we should just let God do whatever. No. As far as I'm aware, that's not bad. It's just undercooked, the sauce. That's the thing about most store-bought tomato sauces. They're not really as robust in flavor as they could be. Because they haven't been cooked down properly. Because you're effectively getting the Maillard reaction throughout your tomato sauce. Because of the sugars and proteins that are being affected by the heating. And this is one of the reasons why you'll see a lot of, especially like internet chefs, they'll say to add, and I'm just making a mess today. They'll say to add like a squeeze of tomato paste. Because tomato paste is cooked down and then it's had most of its It's basically tomato sauce, but it just doesn't have any real water content in it. And so you don't have to cook it as long either to start having it sort of caramelize inside. But like, if God is going to provide for everything, how does it work? You might say, well, let's say you're homeless and there's people on the street giving out food. Okay, cool. How is God providing them with their needs, with the needs to make the food and whatnot? But then, if you're saying, well, he's growing trees and stuff in the neighborhood, well, what about the pots and pans? Where do those come from? What about the oven? What about the electricity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? There's all these things that are involved in making food. And at some point you gotta say, well, humans got involved. You have to. God didn't build a power plant. Humans did. God didn't build power lines. Humans did. God didn't create stoves and factories. Humans did. There seems to be this disconnect between the end result and how things got there. And a lot of people will say, well, God gave those people that drive or determination or those skills or whatever it is, or put them in the places with those resources and stuff like that. It's like, okay, cool. But then, did God force them to do that? Did God force those people who are in those regions to do those behaviors? Because as far as I can tell, that's where the concept of free will starts to come into play. Like, you can have the knack, you can be in the right area, you can have even the right outside influences, but it doesn't necessarily make you do those things. And I think that is where, and that's one of the reasons why these philosophers talked about what they talked about. And if you don't believe me, go take a philosophy class. Everybody be saying, that's just people writing about people and who gives a fuck. Well, then why are we having the conversation? I mean, obviously it's not a conversation, it's me doing a soliloquy effectively, but I'm monologuing to an invisible audience. Non-existent for all intents and purposes. But that is where free will comes into play. That's why we ask that question. And that's why the question is asked in the first place. Because if you totally stripped away free will, the question wouldn't even be asked. Free will is the story. The story. That is the story in the Bible. In the Garden of Eden. That's the story. It's not about Adam, it's not Eve, it's not the fucking snake, it's not the tree, it's free will. And yet, interestingly enough, what is the story? Rather, what is the lesson behind it? Don't exercise it. Don't exercise free will. Because if you exercise free will, you'll be punished. Because really, think about that. Think about everything that I've just talked about. God gave man everything they needed. And he said, you can do whatever you want. Just don't go over to that tree. Do not eat fruit of that tree. And then they did. And then they were punished because now they knew things. That's why I don't think it's a real story. I don't think that story is a retelling of actual events. I think it is a story that people made up so that they can maintain control. It is a beautiful lesson in subjugation. Because first of all, even if the place that they spoke of is real in some respect or another, it doesn't matter. There's no mythical being that existed that created man from mud and dirt and whatever, breathed life into it, and then took a rib from said man and, you know, breathed life into that and created women. All of it sounds like people who don't know what the hell they're talking about trying to come up with shit. It's almost like a story you would tell your children. Because children ask a lot of fucking questions. And when you got a lot of time, and children got a lot of time, A, the children are going to ask a lot of questions. B, you got a lot of time to make answers up. Now, I'm no parent, but I've been a child, and I've been around parents, and I've been around children. I think children have amazing minds. I think that we as a society underestimate the intelligence of children. That we're getting better at it. But we treat them as nuisances, and which is why I don't want kids, because they are a nuisance to me, at least in the long term. I'm 40. I don't need to be having fucking kids anyway. But if you really think about it, if you truly think about the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, in paradise, and you start thinking about how a child would ask questions and how a parent would try to answer those questions to try to get a child to behave a certain way, and, you know, think about what kids do. They'll start asking the same question over and over again. They'll start, you know, repeating why over and over again. Well, you could just be like, I don't know. And then deal with whatever the fallback is. Or, you know, maybe you're a creative type and you decide to come up with a story. You come up with a story of how God exists. Because God is you in that story. And you created your children through your body. You don't know exactly how it works because you don't understand, you know, things like microbiology and organic chemistry and all that stuff, and anatomy and physiology and everything on the micro scale, and oocytes and neocytes and all that stuff. I don't think that's the right word, but it's whatever. It's been a while since my anatomy and physiology class. But you don't understand meiosis and mitosis and osmosis and all that shit. Those things don't exist in your brain. You don't know that sperm and eggs even exist. Because you haven't had a microscope to discover this crap. And so you're trying to tell a story of an authority figure and their children. Because we humans tell stories and we use analogies to get points across, totally makes sense that the Garden of Eden would be a story that a parent would tell their child, basically how to behave, how to do what they're told, to not ask questions, to just behave. Because if you do ask questions, if you start not listening, if you do not succumb to the will of the authority figure, you will be punished. Do as you're told, or you'll be punished. That's the lesson of the Garden of Eden. And yes, I would know. I'm not just pulling shit out of my ass. I was raised Catholic. You know? And I don't mean just because my parent, no, they forced me to go to fucking church every Sunday. I had to go to Sunday school. I'm well aware. I haven't fully read the Bible page to page, front to back, but I've read it. I sat down and started reading Revelations. I couldn't really picture it. I couldn't get my head across it. Maybe someday I will. I mean, there's probably a Bible somewhere. It was in the other one. I don't know about here. But, the thing is, though, is that to aspects of our society, you can't live in a world without God. You can't. Because if you did, it would tear down everything they've built their lives on. It would destroy the foundation of not only their identity, but everything that they do their life in. That it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's work, whether it's family, it doesn't matter, whatever it is. If you destroy the base, the whole thing crumbles. And if you destroy the base of anything, there's a lot of problems that happen after that. There's a large chain of consequences. And so, obviously, you can't just straight up challenge people like that. You can't tell them that they're wrong. It doesn't work. But, and I'm not even saying you have to. I'm not. Used to be, I was a staunch atheist. Spent so much of my time online, I still do. But during my staunch atheist days, I would do everything in my power to shut down any possible conversation about religion, to try to gotcha, to try to one-up. It's not like that anymore. Because I don't need to be right. I also know that me being right won't change anything. It's just like anything. You can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. Wait a minute. Isn't that the whole conversation we're having right now? Free will. Yeah. I didn't even think of that when I said the analogy, leading a horse to water. I didn't think of that at all until right after I said it. But that's the conversation. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Now, you can provide propaganda to make them think that what they're thinking is the right way to think, or that the way that they behave and the way they think is the wrong way. But then you have to figure out why those people are doing what they're doing. And when
You can go back to the Bible and you can talk about distrust and the devil and hell, and that your free will might send you to this place so that if you do follow instructions, you'll go to paradise. You can see why people will fall in line. Especially if, whether they decided to or not, whether they're weak-willed or not, humans and just the universe at large will take the path of least resistance. One of the biggest forms of resistance that can come into an everyday person's life is the backfire effect. Somebody tells you something, and I've talked about it in another video. Somebody tells you something that is antithetical, not only just the way you think, but the way you live your life, to a point where even if they provide proof, it only makes you double down on that thing, on that lie or whatever it may be. And the reason is because we honestly, truly, innately feel that it is a threat. It's a real threat, not a fake threat or something like that, but we feel as if it's a real threat to us, our being. Just like if there was a car coming towards us and we're about to fucking die and we consider that a threat, it activates the same parts of your brain despite the fact that it's not truly a real threat. So we balk against it. And we back away from it and we just keep going the way we're going. Path of least resistance, because we're not going to follow through on that thing. We're not going to, it's like being told that your dinner, however you want it cooked, doesn't matter what it is, not only will it be free, but it'll be the highest possible quality ever. But you got to stick your hand in this pain box, and then after 30 seconds of that, you got to walk through like 300 feet of brambles. You don't want to do that shit. You're going to be willing to go around. And that ephemerality of that thing that may not even be it, because then there's a distrust. There's a distrust of the alternative, because part of the process, and am I saying that this is inherently propagandistic, or if that's even a word, or that they, like the churches themselves are somehow evil or whatever? No, I'm not saying that. I know that is often, that's even somewhere where my brain would go, and where other people's brains would go. That's where my brain would go when I was a staunch atheist and all that shit. But I look at a different sort of philosophy. Hanlon's razor. Never assume malice when it can be explained by effectively incompetence or ignorance. Now, sometimes you can assume malice. Joel Osteen, malice. Dude just wants all your money. He doesn't give a shit about you. 700 Club, malice. They don't give two shits about you. Your local priest, probably not malice. Unless he's diddling your kids. And then malice. Because he's doing it for power. Because that's what sexual assault, rape, child molestation, etc. That's what those all are. They're not sex-oriented. They are power-oriented. We use sex as a power grab. But I don't think that is the rule for most. It's the rule for those who get the most exposure. But your everyday average person who just goes to church and doesn't give two shits, and they're just trying to make their life whatever it is. It's fine. Do what you want to do. But I'll say that if in doing so, you have then tried to tell everybody else how they're going to live or how they should be living, etc., that's where you start crossing the line. Because then you're overstepping people's free will. If it even exists. Because for all we know, it doesn't. I don't know. And with that, have fun.